This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, guys.
We're at the end of Interpersonal Effectiveness.
Oh my gosh, I did not even realize that until just now when you said it.
Right? That's it. This is it. It's a smorgasbord of random stuff from here on out.
I was gonna say, yeah, fear not, this is not our last episode, but yes, this is the last interpersonal effectiveness one.
It is. This is it. So, as per more or less usual with the end of a module, we're doing a troubleshooting episode. So this is more or less like, that's nice, but it's not working, right? This is meant to be the answer for if you've listened to the skills and you feel like you're trying them out and that shit's not working. All right, Kate Michelle, what now? Mm-hmm. So, ideally, this helps give you an answer for the what now, what to do if it's not working. Mostly through trying to help you pin down why it's not working. I feel like that's the lens, that's the, I don't know, way. I've been having trouble with the vocabulary lately, which is hilarious because normally that's my strong suit. Anyway, that's how they're having us approach it. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Approach is by trying to figure out what the problem is, and then we can kind of head off in the direction of trying to solve it.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Do you have anything else to add to the introduction? I don't know. I feel like it's a fairly straightforward one. When do you use this? When the stuff's not working.
No, I don't really have too much to add. I was just ready to dive into mine.
All right, go, Michelle,
okay.
Go.
So I'm taking the first one, and there's a total of 6 of these. So we're going to go back and forth a couple times here. And the first question that it recommends asking if you're struggling with using the skill, you're not getting the results you want, whatever it is to ask yourself, do I have the skills I need? So this is a very good place to start, I think. Because the thing about interpersonal effectiveness especially is that really it has the 3 big skills,
yep.
Of dear man, give, and fast. And even though it breaks it down into these 3 different skills and these 3 big umbrellas for why we're communicating and what the purpose is for the communication, whether it's asking for something or building a relationship or asserting ourselves and our values, they may not cut it all the time, which is why Kate and I add in a bunch of extra stuff to supplement those 3 skills, because there's more that you might need when you're trying to communicate with someone. So that's the first thing to check in about, is do you have the skills you need? And in answering this question, it might be really helpful to review what you've already tried, to look over what the things were. Again, DBT skills or not, you may have other skills that you're using that don't have a DBT label or a DBT name, but are still things communication-wise that really help you a lot of the time. So looking at what you've already tried, and asking yourself, like, do you know what you want to say? Did you follow the skill instructions to the letter? This is something we talked about in a previous troubleshooting episode. This becomes, I think, especially important with interpersonal effectiveness. If you miss even one letter in Dear Man...
I was going to say, literal letters, following it to the letter. In this case, the literal letter.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be rough if you're missing a piece of Dear Man. And I would say that applies to give and fast as well. It's really important for interpersonal effectiveness in particular that you are touching on each of the letters in the skill that you're using. So make sure you're double checking that. And if you're not sure, right, if you're sensing like, okay, I mean, there's 5 other things we're going to talk about, but if already right off the bat, you're sensing for yourself like, okay, I'm not sure if I do have enough skills here, or I'm not sure if I'm really feeling confident enough in the skill that I'm trying to use. Like, I don't really think I've got this skill down yet. I think that's maybe a part of my struggle, is that I still feel like I don't really know what I'm doing with this skill. It recommends a couple things. So the first thing is to write out what you want to say first. Kate and I tend to be pretty flexible. There are certain times where we absolutely recommend writing things out, such as with pros and cons. That is a skill where we highly recommend writing things down. A lot of times, though, you do not have to write things down. You can practice in other ways without putting pen to paper, or without typing out what you want to say, or what have you. However, if you're struggling, writing things out may help if you haven't tried it yet. So you can do that. It also recommends rereading the instructions. So go back to some of the handouts that we've posted in the Facebook group. Go back and re-listen to the episode again if you want to. You may get something that you haven't gotten out of it before, and that may help. It says you can also get coaching from someone you trust, aka a therapist would be ideal. You can also email Kate and I, though. We're happy to help you out. You can post about it in the group saying, hey, do other people have recommendations? Because that's a community of now over 400 people.
Which is insane.
So insane. I was going to be stoked if we got 100 people in the Facebook group. 400. Of other people who are also on this DBT journey with you, who can help. If you happen to have a friend or a family member, someone you know in your life who's done DBT themselves, you can chat with them. Whatever it is, you can try to get advice from somebody who knows a little bit of what you're talking about, who you can say, I'm struggling with Dear Man, and they know what Dear Man is, for example. And building off of that, it says you can also practice with a friend or in front of a mirror. I recommended this. Which one did I recommend this with? Either the Appear Confident from Dear Man or Acting Interested with Give. One or the other. I think it was Dear Man. But yeah, you can totally practice in front of a mirror. It might seem silly, but we don't know how we look or how we're coming across unless we look at ourselves in a mirror. We don't know what that other person we're interacting with is seeing. So it can really help, or to do some role plays with a trusted other and to try out the skills before you use it with the person who you actually want to do it with. So those are all things that can help you just get more confident with the skill that you're trying to use, to make sure that you really have it down and that you are feeling skillful when you enter your next interaction with someone where you're wanting to pull out some DBT and give it a try.
I like it.
Yeah. Excuse me.
I don't have really anything to add to that. I think you covered it.
Oh, thank you.
Sometimes you just got it covered.
I appreciate that.
All right, so I'm on, do I know what I really want in this interaction? Which is a harder question than I think we think it is a lot of the time.
It's a very hard question.
Right? Because there's layers. It's like an onion, right? And so I think it's something that bears more thought the more complicated an interaction is, right? Because there's generally, I would say, like an immediate thing. There's a thing we want right the fuck now, right? This is what I want. But then you're like, ooh, but what if that jeopardizes the relationship? Is the relationship more important to me? Or is this thing that I want right now more important to me? And then but is this relationship actually more important to me if they won't, respect this boundary I'm trying to set? Or, right? There's just a lot of stuff going on. The more complicated or long-standing or important the relationship is with the person you're trying to practice these skills with, etc., the more possibilities there are about what you might want, right? There's more layers to what you might want, I guess, is what I'm thinking. So some good questions to ask yourself might be things like, am I undecided about what I really want in this interaction? Which is something I sort of think about it like, oh, never mind. Haha. The next one down is, am I ambivalent about my priorities? That's exactly what I was going to say, right? Do I know, am I undecided about what I really want? Do I know what my real priority is? outside of maybe just this moment, my longer standing, my sort of longer view priority, and is the longer view priority more important? That kind of consideration. Also, am I having trouble balancing, for instance, asking for too much versus not asking for anything, or saying no to everything versus giving in to everything, right? There can be this real temptation, I think, just as humans in general, but especially some people in particular struggle with this, of kind of all or nothing thinking, right? Well, if I can't have exactly what I want, then fuck it. Chuck it into the fuck it bucket, right? Like, I don't want anything, right? Or I'm scared that if I give an inch, they're going to take a mile. So even if I could say yes to this one thing, I'm just going to say no to everything, right? So there's this, I would say that this is kind of inviting you to get more dialectic, maybe, with what you're looking for or with the situation. So, what do you want? What are your priorities? Are you coming at it with a balanced approach? Considering what you want. And then last but not least, it's like is shame or fear getting in the way of knowing what you really want? Trying to pull an example out of my hat. I want to ask this person out, but I'm afraid of being rejected, or I'm sure they're out of my league, so I'm embarrassed that I even want to say anything about it, right? Or, there's all sorts of much more interesting and complicated reasons we might be feeling, fear or shame, especially when it comes to interpersonal interactions. But, is that thing getting in the way of you knowing what you want? Sometimes we're ashamed of what we want, which can get in the way of us recognizing it as a need or want. So some things to try if your issue you think might be in one of these categories that more or less all focus around understanding and prioritizing your actual desires or needs in the interaction. So it can help to do pros and cons, to compare different objectives. I'm realizing now that probably I could have done the research to find out the different episode numbers for some of these things. I didn't. But we have a whole episode on pros and cons. So that's something you can listen to if you need a refresher. But, right, do pros and cons about the different things that can help you sometimes get a little bit more clarity on what it is that you're really looking for. Also, using some emotion regulation skills to help you reduce any fear or shame that might be in the way. So, self-soothing with the 5 senses.
Opposite
Is a
action.
big one for me. Opposite action. Michelle's good on that one. Right, so just, help yourself either reduce the fear and anxiety, or as Michelle pointed out, opposite action to the fear and shame, right, can get you through this kind of moment. But I highly recommend, even though it doesn't explicitly say this, just taking some time and sitting with yourself, maybe even writing it out, what your various priorities are, and then ranking them, maybe, right? This is the most important thing in this interaction. This is second, third, fourth, right? This is something that'd be nice, but I don't actually really care. So that you have that, so that you can be grounded in your priorities when you enter into the situation, because that can really help you stay on track, help you be focused, help you be mindful, if you've taken the time with yourself first before going into the interaction, to clarify what's going on for you. And if in that, search for clarity, you find that shame or fear is coming up, then try and do some of the emotion regulation skills and self-soothing skills to either help yourself chill out, or, as Michelle pointed out, opposite action to just push through.
And probably doing some check the facts too before opposite action. Now that I think about it.
Fair.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, with this one that you're talking about, Kate, for me, how I see this show up is I tend to have like kitchen sink conversations, I sometimes call them, right? Like you say, everything but the kitchen sink. When we're doing something, and I notice myself sometimes having interactions with people where maybe I've let things build up for a long time, and so then I get into the interaction where I'm finally like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and talk to them about it, and I'm trying to talk about so many things that have happened. Yeah, it's overwhelming for the other person. It's overwhelming for me. They're not really sure what I want out of this interaction. Yeah. I'm not really sure what I want other than just to like express myself. So yeah, it's one of those things where I see this coming up for me sometimes in that way of rather than having many small, shorter conversations about one thing at a time, one issue, it basically just winds up being that I decide to talk about 5 issues at once, and then the interaction doesn't tend to go as well because it can be more emotionally draining for me and the other person and a little more confusing. So that's something to think about with this one. All right, so on to the third question. The third question asks, are my short-term goals getting in the way of my long-term goals? Other ways to think about this are, how they phrase it is now winning out over getting what I really want? And is emotion mind controlling what I say and do instead of wise mind? So this came up with our ending relationships episode that we just did of, you know, emotion mind can sometimes really play a role in us ending a relationship, even if in the long term, that's maybe not really what we want, but we react from an emotion mind place. And the way that I think this comes into play a lot of times with interpersonal effectiveness is that most of the time we want to, or we have to, maintain a relationship with this person. You know, this interaction that we may be in with them currently is not probably going to be the last interaction we ever have with them. We're going to see them the next day at work. We're going to see them at the next family gathering. Whatever it is, the relationship with this person is going to continue. And sometimes we can lose sight of that in a way. We can get really focused on wanting to have it be that we get this short-term thing out of the way, and it may come across in such a way that we're not thinking about the longevity of this relationship and trying to maintain that as well. Or we lose sight of thinking about the other person's perspective and we're just focused on our own, and we have a hard time balancing that. And so yes, your short-term goal might be asking this friend to, I don't know, loan you money. But your long-term goal is that you want this friendship between the two of you to stay strong. So how much are you really going to push them to loan you that money or that kind of a thing? It's a rough example that I thought of now that I'm thinking about it a little more. But right, like what's more important, getting that money from them or the relationship itself? And being able to manage that.
I like this because it seems like a real continuation or like a more clarity on the, like, do I know what I really want? Right? Like this is one way that you might not. Right, is this immediate versus long term? I think that's a nice, like,
no, subset. Yeah, that's actually really true of like, yeah, am I wanting the short term thing or do I have this long term goal in mind as well? And there's not really a right or a wrong, but just generally speaking, sometimes we have to endure short term discomfort for long term gain, right? Kate and I both worked in community mental health for a while, and at least for myself, I know what kept me in it was because I had this long-term goal of wanting to get the hours that I needed for licensure here in the state of Washington to become a fully licensed mental health therapist. That was my biggest goal in being a community mental health. So even though there were days that were really hard and really shitty, I was able to keep my long-term goal in mind, and that kept me there through maybe some short-term challenges. But there isn't a right or wrong here. If you really realize that your short-term goal is super important, then go with it. Stick with that. Because sometimes I think we can lose sight of what's right in front of us because we're thinking too far down the line. It can go that way. So a lot of this is about knowing yourself and knowing what your short-term goal is and your long-term goal, and then being able to basically, I don't want to say pick which one wins out, but which one you're going to prioritize in this interaction.
Which one wins out? I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You may have to pick a little bit between the two. So how do you do this, right? So DBT suggests doing pros and cons to compare short-term and long-term goals, similar to what Kate was just talking about, where she mentioned doing pros and cons to compare different objectives. Pros and cons also works here to think about, what am I wanting right now? What am I wanting in the long term? And which one do I want to focus on more? The other thing, which I highly recommend, is waiting until another time when you're not in emotion mind. So if you can recognize that you are in an emotion mind state, which we may be in for many, many reasons, and no shame for being in your emotion mind. It happens a lot. Anyways, for me it does.
Yes.
You know, it may be that you did not sleep well the night before. You just had an awful interaction with someone else. And so now if you're going into this new interaction with someone else, you're not feeling so grounded to be able to interact with this next person in the way that you want to. There could be a myriad of reasons for why you might be in your emotion mind. But if you are waiting it out and coming back to it, is ideal for when you could be a little more centered in your wise mind. So that's another option available to you if you recognize that you're focusing too much on the short term and not the long term. And the reason for that is because your emotion mind is taking over. Our emotion mind tends to be very short term focused. Anything to add, Kate?
So it's sort of tangential, but I think it's a skill that could be helpful for the, like, waiting until you're out of emotion mind.
Yeah.
Something that I tell a lot of clients as individuals, just happen to be in partnerships, or also couples that I've seen, is I highly recommend creating and then using a conversational safe word.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just basically, if you're in an interaction with someone and you notice that you're getting flooded, you're getting overwhelmed, you're getting just too emotional to be able to come at it the way you want to, right? You know you're going to say something you're going to regret, or you know you're going to stop being able to think clearly, or you know you're, something like that. Whatever. If you just know you're like, all right, this is hitting me so hard right now that I just can't do this interaction the way that is in line with my integrity, or the way that's going to, like, be in line with my goals, or whatever, that you and, your partner have a word that you both have agreed on that means, all right, stop. The conversation utterly and completely stops in that moment, and you guys separate for an agreed upon amount of time, right? And the agreement should be made when you're making the safe word, when you're creating it, not in the moment.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's going to be another emotion mind decision for how much space to take.
Yes. So do it when you're calm and everything is good. And you're like, all right, if either one of us says popcorn, in the middle of a conversation, we know we're both gonna immediately shut the fuck up, no getting in the last word, part ways, and we're gonna stay apart for at least, I don't know, let's say 15 minutes. At the end of 15 minutes, we're gonna check in, see if we've calmed down enough, and if not, we're gonna go another 15 minutes. If at the end of that it doesn't work, we're gonna try the next day, or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you guys get to negotiate what that game plan is, but then you stick to it, right? Because it's not you, it's not them, it's not anybody's fault that we're all just a bit worse at everything if we're too emotionally flooded, right? Yep. If we're too emotionally engaged, too emotionally overwhelmed, if our emotion mind is just running rampant, then it's okay to need a break, right? To recenter yourself, to do some breathing, do some calming down types of techniques, some self-soothing. So, it's just one way that I recommend for folks. You could do it outside of romantic partnerships. That's just the only context that I've had it in with clients. But, I'm telling you, conversational safe words are awesome. So, I don't know. That's just my little suggestion, I guess.
Nice. So, fun fact, you guys. I think mentioned at the beginning that there are 6 different things we're going over in this episode, and we've gotten through the first 3, which is great. Now we have 3 more to go, and I guess a fun fact, a behind the scenes sneak peek of what happens when we're recording, is that we had totally planned to record this episode on Tuesday. We started doing it, and right after we talked about the third one, Kate's power went out.
Woohoo!
Yeah, there was a big windstorm going on. Actually, a lot of people lost power that day. And so when Kate lost power, we were no longer able to record. So we saved what we recorded on Tuesday, but now picking back up with the fourth thing that Kate's about to talk about. We're recording on a separate day. I'm in a totally different location. So if for any reason you guys are like, why does the sound why is it slightly different
Why
now?
is your flow all
This
broken?
is why. What'd you say, Kate?
I said, why is your flow all broken?
Yeah, like you guys, something shifted halfway through. Yes, indeed, something did.
Several days
So we're gonna,
passed halfway through.
yeah, a few days have passed. Lots has happened, but we are gonna finish this episode come hell or high water. So, all right, Kate, are you ready to get back
away.
into it?
Yes. So we did do a little bit of re-listening to what we'd been talking about to refresh ourselves on where we were and what was going on. And in so doing, I reminded myself that I accidentally got ahead of myself a little bit in my response to Michelle's third point. I was talking about basically some skills for how to handle it if your emotions get so overwhelming that you have a hard time doing other things. And lo and behold, the fourth question is, are my emotions getting in the way of using my skills? So obviously I am aware of the fact that that's a thing that happens and want to pass it on to you because it totally does. No shade thrown on anybody. This shit happens. So the two sort of clarifying questions that the sheet says for DBT is, have I gotten too upset to use my skills, or are my emotions so high that I'm over what DBT calls your skills breakdown point? And this really is a lot of what I was just talking about for so many reasons, because we've been having a hard day, or if we're sick, or the world is stressful, or because someone says or does something that happens to poke a past trauma. There's all sorts of totally valid reasons that our emotions might really spike, right? They might just sort of shoot through the roof, and at that moment, no one's going to be good at using their skills, especially some of these interpersonal effectiveness skills, which, let's admit, are a little bit more head focused, head-y, than some other DBT skills. So, of course, you're not going to be sitting there, I don't know, skillfully working your way through Dear Man. if
you're really emotionally overwhelmed, not going to happen.
If you were just flooded, you're going to be like, dear, fuck you. I don't know, right? Like, it's just not going to happen really well. Oh, man, now I want to try and think of something that the acronym Dear, fuck you works. Anyway, that's just me. So, if I think of it, Michelle will post it. No. So, this is just, are your skills so high that perfectly reasonably, you're just not acting very skillfully? So, some of the suggestions that DBT makes is using tip skills. Michelle, more times we ought to have looked back and found out the episode number.
I'll go find it.
Okay.
Just keep chatting.
I'll just keep chatting. So, tip skills are awesome if you are, legitimately overwhelmed by your emotions. It's not a brainy skill at all. It's a very physical skill. It's a very simple skill, and it really can help bring us back from, I guess you could say, like, the brink.
And it is episode number 17.
Thank you. Episode number
You're
17,
welcome.
if you need to deep dive into it a little bit more. Have you used self-soothing skills? That's another thing that it suggests. So this, I think of it as your emotions are pretty overwhelming, but maybe you're not completely brainless yet. You don't have to shut yourself down. You can kind of calm yourself down from the emotional state that you're in. Lots of the stuff in the emotion regulation module would be good for this. I'm always particularly fond of self-soothing with the 5 senses, just because, again, it's very body focused, and that's much easier when we're really emotionally overwhelmed. So lots of options there, but another thing to consider if you're in this kind of space where you're so emotional you're not being very skillful. And then also just talks about, have you refocused your attention completely on the present moment or your present objective? Something that I tell a lot of my clients is to have the fight you're having. There's this, really human tendency to connect ideas to one another, which is sometimes lovely and genius and great. And if what it is your brain slowly finding how the thing that this person did is just like this other thing that they did, and that other thing that they did, and then what about this one time, and what about this other thing, right? Suddenly all these emotions from all these different times can just sort of pile on your head at once and make you much more emotionally worked up than you would be if you were just in the here and now, focused on this current situation. So sometimes I actually think of these 3 suggestions as being relevant in reduce. How do I want to put this? The first one's if you're the most emotional. The second one's if you're moderately emotional. And the third one's if you're the least overly emotional.
That makes sense.
Right? Because this one is the most brainy of them. This is well, I'm getting really flooded. Is this really all about right now? And if you realize no, being able to be like, all right, let's set that other stuff aside for now. If it still needs to be brought up, they can have their own conversations. We can have our fights about those things later. But for right now, let me refocus and be right here. But that does take self-awareness, the ability to, think clearly, all sorts of things. So either you can think of these as things to use in different situations, or maybe these are things you use kind of sequentially, right? If you start off at this super unbelievably high emotional space, I'm realizing just how much I'm talking with my hands today, which never ceases to entertain me because you all can't see me. Anyway, if you're Michelle can see me. I'm sure she appreciates all the hand gestures.
I can see you. I like it.
Anyway, right? So maybe you start with the tip skills to bring yourself from the, absolute blow up point. Once you've brought yourself down a notch or two with those, then maybe use some self-soothing skills to help calm yourself down even more. And once you're in that place where it feels like your brain is relatively online, you can think to yourself, hey, am I really this upset about just this, or am I piling other stuff in that doesn't belong right now? And all of that is lovely stuff to do after you've used your conversational safe word. Which is the thing I was talking about before my power went out.
Yes.
Bring it full circle. I don't know. Do you have anything else to kind of add to those ideas, Michelle?
Not too much to add. I really like how you talked about it as depending on how much your emotions might be getting in the way or how big your emotions are. Tip is a really great place to start. And yeah, then using maybe some self-soothing and then being able to try to refocus. I like that you thought about it in that way. The other thing that came to mind with me in thinking about tip is because, the I stands for intense exercise. And maybe this wouldn't be too intense, but one of the best things you can do if you do realize your emotions are getting in the way and that you or the person you're interacting with, maybe one or both of you need to just take a break, is to go for a walk if you can. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have to be a very long walk, but just getting your body moving, getting into a different space, that can help before you come back and continue talking about it. And that is a little bit in line with tip because you're moving your body. Even if it's not the short burst of intense exercise like tip typically means it can still just be a really helpful strategy of like, I'm getting pretty overwhelmed. I can sense that I need a break. Like, let me just take this quick walk and then I'll come back.
Human bodies also, you're right, help process through movement a lot. Like movement often helps us sort of literally, now how do I put it? Literal movement helps us figuratively move through something.
Yes, it really does.
Yep. Humans are good at that. Well, awesome. What's number 5, Michelle?
So number 5 asks, are worries, assumptions, and myths getting in my way when it comes to communicating in the way that you want to communicate? And I don't want to say that the answer to this is going to 100% of the time be yes. But if you're struggling with using some of the skills, or if you're just finding that the interactions that you're having with people are not going the way that you're hoping, this may very well be at least one of the culprits, because our myths run deep. The things that we tell ourselves, just our self-talk, generally speaking, that can have some really deep roots. So even when you understand the skills, you're using the skills, maybe you're not feeling emotionally overwhelmed like Kate was just talking about, but you may still have a script running in your head in the background saying not nice things about you. So that is something to definitely check out. And DBT breaks this down really into 4 different questions or categories to ask yourself. So First question is, are thoughts about bad consequences blocking my action? Like thinking to yourself that this person isn't going to like you, or that, I don't know, if I bring up this issue, we're just going to get into a big fight. That's a big one for me personally. I assume that something is going to just get blown out of proportion and have a really bad outcome. So that's what it's talking about with that question. The next question asks, are thoughts about whether I deserve to get what I want in my way? This can be a big block with Dear Man, and that going effectively and you appearing confident as if you're not believing that you have a right to make the request that you're making. That's going to come across in a totally different manner than if you are truly believing in your heart of hearts that you are deserving and have a right to what you're asking for. It's going to come across in a very different way. So they give this example of thinking to yourself, I'm such a bad person, I don't deserve this. It's just one general way to think about it. But yeah, just thinking that you're not deserving of what you are wanting. The third question asks, am I calling myself names that stop me from doing anything? Unfortunately, especially if you grew up in a household when you were young that was not emotionally supportive, and if you were called names by your siblings, your parents, peers at school, whatever it is, again, as I was saying a moment ago, these things run deep. And one thing that's like, I guess, on the spectrum of how bad this could be is pretty benign, but I know it's certainly stuck with me. I was very regularly labeled as shy when I was young. And so now when it comes to using my voice, speaking up for something that's important to me, saying that I'm having an issue with something, you know, whatever it is, sometimes that still gets in the way a little bit. That's a label that I can still sometimes put on myself. So catching that for you, if there's any names or any labels that you're putting on yourself that diminish your confidence or your ability to speak your mind. And then finally, am I believing myths about interpersonal effectiveness? Ooh, Kate, your turn. You want to go find the myths episode?
Ooh, sure.
While I talk more about it. So if we talked a lot in the interpersonal effectiveness myths episode, I think it was almost an hour and a half. There was a lot to say about those myths. So if you need a refresher, you can go to the episode that Kate's about to tell me. But while she's looking it up, you know, there can be all sorts of things that we tell ourselves about communication. A big one for me that I have referenced a couple times since we recorded that episode is this idea that, you know, making requests of someone is a pushy, rude thing to do. You know, that's a myth that I hold. So noticing if there's any myths from that episode or just any other things that you tell yourself in terms of communication in general that are getting in your way of communicating the way that you want to. So if you're,
I am trying to
Kate,
find
did
it,
you
by
find
the way.
it? Oh, okay.
I found like when it was published, but the thing I'm looking at online doesn't show the numbers of them, so I'm opening a different thing. So I can
Oh,
actually find
gotcha.
the
Okay,
number
just
that it is, rather than just tell you that it was on Wednesday, August 19th, but that's not enough information. So
yeah, no, that's perfect. Just feel free to butt in whenever you find it. So in terms of what you can do if you notice that your self-talk or the thing that you're worrying about, like, I just can't do it. There's no way they're gonna say yes to what I want. You know, if I bring this issue up, it's gonna become this big deal. Whatever it is that you are mentally telling yourself about this interaction, that
35.
35? Mm-hmm. Wow, that wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't. It was right. It was the first episode we did for this module for interpersonal effectiveness.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I suppose I should have you maybe, now that we're so far into this, yeah, it really does feel important to reference back these other episodes if people haven't listened. Can you look up check the facts and opposite action for me as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because those are 2 out of the 3 things that DBT recommends is to check the facts, right? Is it really true, for example, that I am shy? Is it really true that if I bring up a concern that I have with someone, it's going to lead to this big fight? Well, if I check the facts, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen. that kind of a thing. So checking the facts is really important.
The check the facts is 16 and opposite action is 17.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, it can really help to check the facts of our self-talk. A lot of times our self-talk is not rooted in fact. It's not. And even if it may be something where it's like, yeah, well, I chickened out of having this conversation, the last 3 times I tried to have it. So how do I know that it's going to go well this time? That kind of a thing. Well, yeah, that may be factual that it was not something that you brought up the previous 3 times that you wanted to, but maybe the circumstances are different now. Or even if it's true that you haven't done it the last 3 times, is it really because, you're a coward or whatever it is that you're saying about yourself? There may have been other factors that interfered with why it didn't happen and that kind of a thing. So checking the facts is really important. Doing opposite action, especially for fear, because, right, these tend to be worries, things we're anxious about that are holding us back. So if we're practicing opposite action of fear, basically, to really boil it down, what that means is facing the fear, doing the thing, trying to practice it and do it anyway and say what we want to say, even if we are scared shitless. That's the opposite action of fear, is to do it. So checking facts, doing opposite action, and then, of course, it makes it sound so simple, though this is really hard work that can take a long time in therapy, is to challenge the myths, is the third thing that it suggests that you do. But we may have said this in the myths episode. It can be helpful that once you know, like, what your top couple myths are, to spend some time either reflecting on them. Kate did a closing moment about challenging a myth. You can reflect, meditate if that's your jam. You can journal if that's your thing. Whatever it is, just to spend some time really getting curious about why that myth is there and why you hold it without any judgment of yourself. It's there for some reason or other. And it can help us to understand why we have the myths that we do, in terms of then figuring out what else do we want to tell ourselves instead. And that's all it is challenging the myths, is just thinking, what else do I want to say to myself instead of that thing that maybe I've been saying or thinking consciously or unconsciously for a long time. What's the new thing I want to turn towards and tell myself instead? So this is a lot about just being compassionate towards yourself, being kind to yourself when you are preparing to have an interaction with someone, or when you have an interaction that doesn't go very well. If you are kinder to yourself, maybe it might go differently in the future and be more effective. So what are your thoughts on all this, Kate?
Oh, man. Let me think. I was, looking at our episodes and stuff, so I wasn't paying as close to the attention as I sometimes I do. No, I just think you're right. I don't know. I don't have a lot to add. I just thought it was perfect at the beginning when you were saying, these are probably there. One of these is probably there. If you're having a hard time with interpersonal stuff, right? Especially a lot of, they talk about, they say, calling yourself names, but I just think any kind of, I don't know, what's the opposite of coping ahead? Failing ahead, right? Any kind
just
of,
telling yourself you can't do it.
Yeah, I can't do this,
Yeah.
I'm not good at this, right? Just our self-deprecating talk. It doesn't even have to be, name calling per se, but just anything where you're just deprecating yourself and not having confidence, not having faith. I have a hard time imagining that none of these problems are there somewhere. So I don't know, just spot on, I think. As Michelle was saying, no one, I don't know, grabbed a menu and decided what myths to hold about themselves, right? You didn't install these.
Yeah.
These are things that happened to you, not stuff you chose. So I also liked your focus on being kind to yourself about it, because turns out if you shame yourself for shaming yourself, you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah. That's not going to breed confidence.
That does not help.
Yeah.
I think we're on the last one.
We are.
And
tell us all about it.
I hate this one.
Oh, you do?
Well, all right. How do I want to put this? I hate this one because to me, in a lot of ways, it's the least hopeful. I don't know. know. The other ones seem like there's a lot that you can do to tackle them, and this is one of those ones where one of the things suggested is radical acceptance, which is great and important and a huge skill and wonderful. And also, like, anything where the thing is radically accept means you don't have a lot of power to change it.
This is true. Even before you say it, though, what I will say that I appreciate for why this is one of the 6, and I think it is purposeful that it is the last one, is because if all else fails, it may be this. And I appreciate that it acknowledges that, because when it comes to interpersonal effectiveness, you know, if it's a one-on-one interaction with you and one other person, you are 50% of that equation. If you are, say, a member of a family or, you know, roommates, right? Let's say you live with 3 roommates. You are 25% of the equation. So it is really great to try to control your percentage, whatever it is, so that you are, you know, as effective as you can be in how you're communicating. And at the same time, it may be that because of whatever's going on with those other people or that other percentage or the environment or context you guys are in, you can be super effective and it still may be a struggle.
Yes, this is true. No, I guess you're right. I phrase it a little weird. It's not my least favorite. I'm glad they put it in here too. Like, yeah, because it is important to know. Like, I'm glad they acknowledge that. I don't know. I'm always glad when anything acknowledges that it's not all powerful. Yeah. Like, sometimes there's just shit you can't control. So I guess maybe we should actually, I don't know.
Say what it is.
Yeah, actually say what it is, which is the environment more powerful than my skills? So these are things like, are the people that have what I want or need more powerful than I am? Are people who are, that's a weird way of phrasing it, but commanding me powerful and in control? Will others be threatened if I get what I want? Or do others have reasons for not liking me if I get what I want? And this is really just a list of, yeah, like you were saying, Michelle, of possible explanations for, I'm doing everything right and it's still not working. And so it's not, I'm glad they acknowledge that there are situations that are like that. And you're right, I think it comes last for a reason. And it just makes me grouchy.
Because then what?
Thing, right? Like, yeah. Man, this is unfair. Well, of course, so is everything else. But that's fine. I'm just in a weird mood, probably. Screw you, environment being more powerful than people. No. So this is, is the person that you're trying to practice your skills with your boss? Like, there's a very real power differential there, and it's not one that you can just make go away, right? Is someone, you know, is it your landlord? Is it, like, there's so many different, you know, or, I don't know, someone who's in charge out in the world, right? A police officer, right? Or, like, there's just so many different places where people have legitimate power over you. In Michelle's idea with the for God's sakes, roommates, there we go. I think that, you know, you're one of 4, so if the other 3 all decide that something's gonna be one way, right? You're just outnumbered, right? So even if any given one of them isn't more powerful than you, all 3 of them, it turns out are, right? So it's just something to look at. If you're sitting here feeling like you're beating your head against a wall because you've tried everything and nothing's working, maybe ask yourself these questions. Give a moment and be like, is it my fault, or am I just butting up against something I can't control, I can't change, in the environment or about the people that I'm interacting with? So it does say, you know, there's a couple of different things you can try problem solving. Maybe there's a way to shift the circumstances or, you know, negotiate with a person in a different fashion. So, you know, give it a try, look at problem solving, see if there's something to be done there. Possibly also find yourself a powerful ally, right? Like, maybe your direct boss is being awful, but it turns out you get along really well with their boss, who might be willing to help you with something. Or, I don't know, you can sway one of those roommates over to your side of the story or the equation. So sometimes if you by yourself aren't enough, having allies, having someone to have your back, can be really helpful. You know, maybe your spouse stands with you to help you feel stronger in facing your parents, or, right, there's all sorts of different ways that having someone next to you, having someone as an ally, having someone have your back can either literally increase your power in a situation or at least help you feel more empowered, which can also be something valuable. And then last but not least, practicing radical acceptance. Ooh, you want to be the one on the find the episode?
So I was already doing that, and I don't remember exactly what you said for check the facts and opposite action. I thought you said like 17 and 18 or something like that.
16 and 17?
They are 14 and 15 on mine. I use Apple Podcasts for check the facts and opposite action. So I don't know if the Q&A episodes interfere with that, but I have check the facts as 14 and opposite action as 15.
That's weird. Yeah, I have them as 16 and 17.
Ooh, okay, listeners. So it might depend on what app you use. Maybe this isn't as helpful as we're hoping it is. I have problem
there.
solving.
We're only off by 1 or 2.
Yeah, right. Look in the general neck of the woods. You can find your way from there. I have problem solving as 16, and radical acceptance is episode 24.
Let's see. I have problem solving as 19. And what was the other one we were talking about?
Radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance. That's what? That's 29? I'm so confused.
Okay, strange. Anyways, we're hoping we're steering you guys in the
learning.
general direction.
I'm looking. I use Castbox. That's the place where I normally listen to stuff through.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Gotcha.
sometime when we're done recording, we're definitely gonna have to sit and see how it gets off because I'm now terribly curious.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Anyways, pull up whatever app you use to listen to us and just scroll. Scroll until you see these titles. The problem solving and radical acceptance.
Right? There's only about 45. You can find it. We have faith in you.
Figure it out. We have faith in you. That's funny. I'm glad we realized, though, that the numbers are a little off.
It's funny.
Before we posted it. Otherwise, somebody's going to go through and be like, they got it wrong. Well, now we know why. It's
Yep.
not going to be right for everyone.
Wrong. Maybe we're both wrong. I don't even know.
Or we're both right. Dialectics.
True. We're both wrong and right. Ooh. Anyway, do you have anything to add? I think you added a good bit at the beginning, but do you have more to add to that environment being more powerful thing?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked everything you said, and I was just thinking of some additional circumstances where this might apply, and I talk about this one a lot in particular with clients who I work with that were in abusive relationships where they come out of that relationship and basically, you know, they're trying to, I don't know, rebuild their life, form a new relationship, whatever it may be. And they are maybe making a request or asserting themselves, and they're like, why didn't I ever do this? You know, I didn't do this before. Like, I wish I had done this in my past relationship or something. And I'm like, my guess is that there might have been a time that you tried, but given who you were with, this didn't go well. And then they're like, yeah, you're right. I guess I did kind of try that a couple times, but then, you know, this horrible consequence happened, and so I stopped. And I'm like, exactly. So it's not that you can't do it. It's that you were in an environment where it wasn't safe to do it. So this can really apply to abusive relationships. I think this can also apply to marginalized groups. You know, if
You're on point today. Check you out.
Thanks. If you are in the minority when it comes to gender, when it comes to race, when it comes to religion, whatever it is, if you are the minority in a situation, and if you're in an unhealthy environment with your job or with, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, I don't know, but just society in general, where like you can be using your voice and using your skills really effectively, and it may not be listened to and it may not be respected. And that is incredibly unfortunate and sad. And it's also not you. Like, it's kind of the shitty world that we are in. And so to try to give yourself a pass, if you are really doing the work, and it's like, you know, for myself as a female, if I'm speaking to a male boss and they just dismiss me, overlook me, whatever it is, well, and we were talking about in general, bosses hold power as it is, but, you know, could a part of my identity unfortunately be a factor in why I'm not being heard? Yeah, it may be. So that was just another thing I was thinking of. And I guess this will be my final thought because I don't want to go on and on too much. But like I said, I do really like this one at the end. I like this sixth one, as hopeless as it can feel. The finding a powerful ally piece I love. And I think that is so important.
Yeah,
and a powerful ally does not have to be a single person. Powerful ally, though, like it can be a therapist, but it can be like if you are in an abusive relationship, and we talked about this on our ending relationships episode, which was so recent. I'm not going to have us look up what episode it was. That was just recent.
Yeah.
But you know, it may be reaching out to a domestic violence hotline. It may be trying to find a new workplace that is going to be more supportive than the current environment that you are in. You know, it can look a lot of different ways to find an ally. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. That was a lot to add on. But again, I really appreciate the acknowledgement of this barrier.
Yes. No, it is a good thing. I was just grumpy.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, what is our homework
grumpy.
anyway?
So your homework is, out of these 6, I'll briefly review them, and then we'll be posting stuff in the Facebook group. But out of these 6, to try to identify for yourself, what's the biggest thing that generally gets in your way when it comes to interpersonal effectiveness, when it comes to communication with other people? What tends to hold you up or just be a barrier to it going as well as you hoped? So to briefly recap, the 6 things to consider are: number 1, do you have the skills you need? Number 2, do you know what you really want in this interaction? Number 3, are your short-term goals getting in the way of your long-term goals? Number 4, are your emotions getting in the way of using your skills? Number 5, are worries, assumptions, and myths getting in the way? And number 6, is the environment more powerful than your skills? So to reflect on those, and when you've identified the one that is the biggest struggle for you, you know, to try to do some of the things that we talked about with that one. Each one had, at least 2 or 3 ideas for how to combat that. So start working on that, even if that means maybe going back and re-listening to an episode for one of the skills that it talks about as being helpful to work on that area. Again, journaling, just thinking about it, whatever it is, trying to do some of the suggestions for the one that you realize is the hardest for you. So, yeah. And I'm going to do awkward self-promotion this time.
Awkward self-promotion.
Here we go. So first and foremost, we are shouting out and thanking Alicia today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. Alicia recently contributed to our Patreon. So if you want to contribute and get a shout out in a future episode, we only have so many episodes left, you guys. Like, we have a few more, but we're getting there.
We're getting there. Turns out DBT is not endless.
DBT is not endless. There's a finite amount of skills, and we've worked through the vast majority. So time is running out, and if you want a shout out, all it takes is a $2 monthly contribution to the Patreon. So you can do that by going to patreon.com/dbtandme, checking out stuff on Etsy. So just go to etsy.com and search for DBT and me, all one word, and you'll find our shop. I recently designed the thing about should.
Oh, yeah,
so it says, like, t-shirt or sweatshirt that says, not shitting on myself today. I really like it.
I like it.
Give us a rating or write us a review on Apple Podcasts if that's where you listen, and send us emails because we want to do more Q&A episodes before we wrap things up. So to do that, just email us at dbtandmepodcast@gmail.com with any questions you have.
Done and
Okay. Done and done.
All right.
Closing moment.
Closing moment. Also, I apologize in advance because part of what I'm using for the closing moment is on a piece of paper, and as much as I will try to quietly turn it over in the middle, you might hear a...
So to not be disturbed by paper sounds.
Don't be disturbed by paper sound. I'm trying.
That totally works. And actually, right before we start, because I'm at my office today, you guys, I'm not in my walk-in closet as we conclude this episode. I'm going to lower my chair so that, because I'm short, I'm only 5'1", and I want my feet to be on the floor for closing moment, so I feel grounded.
I like
Okay.
it. Okay.
So I'm settled in, and hopefully you guys won't hear my chair too much if I lean back.
You'll hear the chair, the paper rustling. It'll be good.
Yeah.
We're practicing our mindfulness in a distractible environment.
Exactly. That's perfect.
All right, everybody. Well, just as Michelle is doing, I invite you all to go ahead and get comfortable. You'll be sitting, standing, laying down, walking around, whatever feels good and right to you right now. And if you feel safe and comfortable doing so, to go ahead and close your eyes. As always, we're going to begin by just tuning into our breath. You don't have to breathe any more deeply or any more slowly than you are naturally. It's just about paying attention. Just about narrowing our focus onto the sensations and rhythms of our breath and letting those welcome us into the present moment and into our bodies. So now I'd like you to bring to mind a time that an interpersonal interaction did not go as planned, did not go as hoped, did not go as intended. This can be a time where you were asking someone for something, sometime when you were trying to make an apology or repair a relationship. And this could be a time that you were working on setting a boundary. Whatever it is, just bring that interaction to mind. Take a moment to review it in your memory. Go over what you can recall, where it seemed to go poorly, how it turned out. And now what I'd like you to do, if possible, is picture yourself from that interaction, as though that past you is standing there in front of you now. And when you have yourself standing there in front of you in your mind's eye, I'd like you to go ahead and ask your past self this series of questions. See if in this interview with your past self, you might be able to suss out what went wrong. Which of these potential problems, or which 2 or 3 of these potential problems, got in the way of this interaction going well. And so, again, holding in mind that interaction that didn't go as intended and picturing in front of yourself this past version of you, go ahead and ask them, did I have the skills that I needed in this interaction? Take a moment, pause after the question, give your past self the opportunity to answer. It could be a yes, a no, a maybe, something more complicated. There's no right or wrong answers here. I'm just asking your past self, did you have the skills that you needed in this interaction? Next, go ahead and ask, did you know what you really wanted in this interaction? Going into it or coming out of it, did you clearly know what your priorities were? And then were you actually acting in line with them? Again, giving your past self a moment to see what they have to say. Next, go ahead and ask, were my short-term goals getting in the way of my long-term goals? Or, since you're talking to your past self, you might say, did your short-term goals get in the way of your long-term goals? Ask your past self if maybe they got caught up in the moment and charged ahead because of a momentary desire or a momentary fear or anger and lost sight of their bigger or longer-term objectives. Once again, just taking a moment or two to hear what they have to say, to hear what your past self's thoughts are on this situation in question. Next, go ahead and ask, did your emotions get in the way of using your skills? Were you flooded? Were you just out of your mind and unable to think clearly because your emotions were really running rampant with you? Listening non-judgmentally to whatever answer comes up when you ask that question. Next, asking, were worries, assumptions, or myths getting in your way? This one might take a little bit of a longer answer. Maybe there's a lot in here if the answer is yes. So do give your past self a moment or three to think and to answer. Still focusing on not being judgmental of this past self. Trying to keep in mind through all of this that your past self was certainly doing the best that they knew how in that moment. And it can be helpful to your future self to better understand how things might have gone wrong. Last but certainly not least, I'm going to ask your past self if the environment was stronger than them. Did the person that they were interacting with have power over them? Were they in a place where bias or prejudice might have been impacting the situation against them? Whatever it might be, just checking in to see if the person or the environment was more powerful in that moment, and that might have been a part of you not getting what you hoped or needed or wanted from the situation. Once you've given your past self a chance to answer all of these questions, go ahead and thank it and let it fade away from view. When you've done that, I invite you to go ahead and start taking some slower, more deliberate breaths as you try and release that past situation and whatever emotions or frustrations might have come up with it when you were imagining it. I'd also suggest that if you feel any interest in doing so when we're done with this meditation today, maybe write down what you remember of the answers. They might be good clues for things to look for in your future interactions as well. So go ahead and stretch as your body might want you to. Take those deep breaths. Maybe roll your wrists or ankles, your shoulders or neck. When you feel ready to do so, you can go ahead and open your eyes. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week,